Good afternoon. My name is Lindsay, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the Midwest and Great Plains Drought Update. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. John Ives with National Weather Service. You may begin your conference.
Thank you, Lindsay, and welcome everyone to today's Drought Update webinar. I'm happy to introduce a new briefer for today, Laura Edwards. She's a climate field specialist at the South Dakota State University Extension. And at this time, Laura, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, John, for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here for my first presentation with this group. And my contact information is there on the main screen, and it will also be shown at the end. This is a collaborative partnership among several parties, including the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Weather Service, Regional Climate Centers, and National Drought Mitigation Center. Just a look ahead to the next Outlook webinar, which will be held on July 18th at the same time, 1 o'clock. And you can always archive or access the archive of the past webinars online as well. And then at the end, there will be operator assistance with Lindsay for questions. Just a outlook of, or a little outline of what I'll be discussing today. First of all, I'll be addressing the recent or current conditions, including May, and a little bit about the spring season overall, touching on the drought update, and then going into the climate and drought outlooks for the coming season. First of all, just to kind of recap what May brought us in the region, in the Midwest and Great Plains. Temperature-wise, we were pretty near the middle of the pack here, near average across most of the plains and Midwest, which is indicated in the white color there on this map. A few areas were slightly above average temperature in the eastern side, and the state of Wyoming and Montana on the western side. To delve into the details a little bit more here, the National Climatic Data Center has created climate divisions, areas that have similar climatologies, generally speaking. And this kind of gives you a closer look at the range of May temperatures that we experienced over the region. So actually, some areas in Minnesota, Iowa, actually a bit below average in temperature for May, and the areas along the eastern Great Lakes were much above normal in the orange color. Looking at the spring season overall, and by this I mean spring season is March through May of this year, that 3-month period, looking at how each of those climate divisions ranked in the historical context of 119 years of record. Those climate divisions in northeastern South Dakota and western Minnesota in the dark blue color recorded their record coldest average temperature for the spring season. The dark blues are very close in much below normal temperatures for the spring season. And I believe the briefing of last month talked about how cool the April temperatures were, and that did drive a lot of the spring seasonal average. Taking a turn towards precipitation now, for the month of May, statewide, Iowa recorded its wettest May on record with a statewide average of 8.84 inches, or 4.77 inches above average. So that's very, very wet. North Dakota had its second wettest May on record with over 5.5 inches statewide average, which is more than 3 inches above their long-term average. But that's not to say that was dry most everywhere else. It was wet across the region. Top 15 wettest for South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Missouri, all in the Midwest and Great Plains region. And again, taking a closer look at the climate divisions from National Climatic Data Center, showing some of those climate divisions that record the record wettest May on record, as the dark greens are indicating in this graph, in this map. And then now looking at the spring season, you can see that the precipitation rankings again show that much of Iowa, southeastern Minnesota, and parts of Wisconsin had their record wettest in climate divisions for the spring season. That's March through May. And also part of southwestern North Dakota. Other areas in the white were near normal for the season. And then the far eastern side of the Midwest in the Ohio and neighboring states were actually a little bit below normal, a little drier than average for the spring season. I apologize for the quality of these graphics here, but I did want to show the most recent 30 days. So since May 21st through yesterday, the departure from average temperature shown on the left, and that is reinforcing that we've been much cooler than average in eastern South Dakota, most of Minnesota, and northern Iowa, kind of the heart of the Midwest and Great Plains region. And then on the right, showing the departure from average precipitation for the same period since May 21st, and even showing that since that time, that's been continued wet across many spots of Iowa, and then also south into Missouri and Illinois. Another way to look at the change from last month to this month is to look at the stream flow from the U.S. Geological Survey. This is looking at the 7-day average. The graphic on the left is looking at May 16th, which was the day of the last webinar, and then I'm looking at Tuesday, June 18th here on the right. I think notable areas of change are South Dakota, which has actually gotten a little wetter, particularly on the western side of the state. North Dakota also has been wetter in their southwest side. Some areas have turned out quite a bit drier, looking at Nebraska and into Kansas, where we've seen some drought intensification in that area, as we'll see in a later graphic. Just a close-up here of flood stage, seeing as how we've had so much precipitation in this last month or so across the region. The map on the left is the Missouri River Basin. The orange colors are showing just minor flooding in some areas, including the James River in northeastern South Dakota and parts of western Missouri. And then on the right, a graphic showing here of the Mississippi River Basin in areas that are in flood stage. Again, the orange is showing minor to moderate. Red is showing moderate to major flood stage. The Souris River in North Dakota is one of those areas that is in flood stage, and then further down in the Mississippi and Illinois River basins along the Missouri and Illinois border area. So there's been quite a substantial bit of moisture that's come in the way of precipitation over the last month or so over the season, and we've seen quite a bit of improvement in the northern plains, at least, in the way of soil moisture. There's a very strong line, very strong gradient, perhaps, between the haves and have-nots. The northern plains in North Dakota especially has changed significantly from a month ago. The May 14th soil moisture map is shown on the left, and the soil moisture anomaly, is on the right side for June, showing just the stark change between the dry conditions that were just a month ago or so. But continued dry and maybe even a little bit worsening conditions there again on the Nebraska and Kansas border area, and some residual dry areas still hanging on in southwestern South Dakota and western Minnesota. Here's looking at the U.S. Drought Monitor for the Midwest and Great Plains region. Looking at the change here from a month ago to today. This was just issued this morning, the latest weekly update to the Drought Monitor, showing from 3 months. If you look back even 3 months ago, there's been about 25 percentage point change improvement of conditions in the Drought Monitor. And that's pretty significant across this region. But surely the exceptional drought in the maroon color is hanging on tight in Colorado, Kansas, and parts of western Nebraska. To look into some of the impacts of the season's climate so far, one of the things I would like to show is growing degree days, and this is showing really a reflection of temperature in the corn growing temperature range. The blue colors here are showing that we're a little bit behind as far as growing degree days for the corn season since April 1st. I know that a lot of corn went in pretty late this year into May. So this may be skewed a little bit towards the very cold April we had. But no doubt we are cooler than average for the season, and we've seen that in the crop condition numbers for corn and soybeans and other crops that were planted this spring that are behind what we would think for average growth stage for this time of year. To give you an indication of the U.S. corn areas in the U.S., in the Midwest and Great Plains region, just a very little, well, what I consider a little bit, about 19% of the corn growing area is in some level of drought now. The dark green colors here are showing the major corn growing areas. Light green are showing the minor corn growing areas. And the striped area is the drought area as reflected from the U.S. Drought Monitor map. So you can see how all these drought areas are really more on the western side of the Corn Belt. And here's a time series, or a graph looking at, nationally speaking, in the corn areas from a year ago, from June 19th on the far left of the graph, and the progression of the percent area of drought that covered the corn area. So we had a maximum of 89% of the corn area in drought last summer around mid-July, and that's kind of slowly tapered off through the rest of the growing season, leveled off in the winter, and then has a steep decline here this spring with the ample moisture and actually more flooding issues than drought issues now in the corn areas. To touch on another impact that we've seen in the region, I'm sure most or all of you have heard of the wildland fire activity in Colorado, including the Black Forest Fire, which is a record number of acres burned. A number I saw this morning, the estimated cost being at $9.3 million so far, and over 500 structures destroyed. I'm sure you've all heard these reports, and it's very extreme fire behavior due to the drought of long-term nature, in addition to the dry conditions this last spring. Looking at wildland fire activity across the region, there are two management areas that cover the Great Plains and Midwest. First is a Rocky Mountain management area that includes more of the western side of our region of interest today. So far to date, they've had 784 fires of over 22,000 acres burned. And if you see just 22,000 acres burned and think that 14,000 of those were from that single fire in Colorado, that's actually quite a quiet year so far. Looking at the eastern region, the eastern side of our region of interest here today for this webinar, that includes most of the Midwestern states up into the Northeast. They've had over 4,000 fires with over 42,000 acres burned. Looking nationally, however, at the 10-year average, we're kind of below average for the number of fires and less than half of the acres that we have seen burned in the 10-year average. So it's not extreme fire year so far to date. In this section here, I'll look ahead at some of the forecasts and outlook products, starting for the 7-day and stretching out to the seasonal forecast. First, for the 7-day precipitation, this is total precipitation accumulated over the 7-day period. This is from the Weather Prediction Center. And looking at it looks like there is a center of activity, center of wetness there over Minnesota and northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan. Kind of a bullseye there of 3.5 to 4 inches over a large area there. And that's looking over the next week. After that, however, looking at 8 to 14 days out, so about 2 weeks out, looks like a drier, warmer pattern may come to the area, more likely to come to the region, with higher probabilities of warmer than average temperatures to come to at least the northern plains and Great Lakes states, as indicated on the left-hand map. On the right-hand map, the brown areas are showing below average precipitation, more likely in that 8 to 14-day window. And the July outlooks that were just released this morning of temperature and precipitation probabilities shows more likely warmer conditions to continue in western Nebraska, Colorado, Kansas, that part of the Plains region. And the precipitation outlook on the right side doesn't show any strong probability towards wet or dry for the month of July. Looking ahead to the seasonal outlook for July, August, and September, this is looking at those 3 months combined. Kind of a similar map to the July one, where we have increased probability of warmer than average temperatures across the western plains, and then equal chances again on the right side of below average, near average, or above average precipitation for that 3-month period on the right-hand map. Currently, there's neither El Nino or La Nina forecast for the region. It's called ENSO, neutral conditions. Forecast for the rest of the summer season, so there's not a strong climate driver, I guess we could say, that we can see in the climate models at this time. Looking to the fire potential outlook for July, shows near normal potential for much of our region, with the exception of Colorado, that could be returning to normal in that striped area. The seasonal drought outlook, valid now through the end of September, was also released today and shows improvement in conditions kind of along the center backbone of our region here of the plains, but the western side, again including Wyoming, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, appears to be forecast in persisting conditions as temperatures rise and drought is still holding on pretty strong in that area. I wanted to mention here also that you may notice that the seasonal outlook has a little different look to it. I won't go into too many of the details here, outside to say that there is a link here at the Climate Prediction Center's website where they have a headline story. You can learn how they have kind of changed the look of the seasonal drought outlook, and they will be adding a monthly drought outlook, which will be published at the end of this month for the first time. So take a look at that when that comes out at the Climate Prediction Center website. To review a little bit now of the current conditions, very wet May and spring in northern plains and upper Mississippi Valley in particular. Near average May temperatures overall, but the very cold April kind of drove the spring average pretty cold. Soil moisture is adequate to even surplus in most of the north and east part of the Midwest and Great Plains, but continues to be dry in Nebraska, Kansas, Colorado, and Wyoming area. I mentioned a little bit about the crop conditions. The winter wheat continues to be pretty pretty poor for this time of year, partly due to the drought issues of last year that carried over. And now corn and soybeans appear to be in poor condition, but for the opposite reason, where now we have almost too much water this spring, and there may likely be quite a few of prevented plant acres due to standing water in fields or too much water. And it's been very cool as well. To summarize again the outlooks, I mentioned ENSO, El Nino's Southern Oscillation forecast is neutral through the summer season, according to the Climate Prediction Center. So there is quite a bit of equal chances on the outlooks for July and the rest of the summer. Drought conditions are likely to improve on kind of eastern fringe of the drought area, where it's gradually been creeping westward. That kind of improvement line kind of gradually been creeping westward lately. Short-term forecast shows for wet here for another week or so as the active pattern continues to move through the northern part of the region, then potentially turning warmer and drier. Humidity might be an issue here if we get warm, as there's quite a bit of moisture out there available for evaporation and evapotranspiration by plants. So that may be an issue if we get a very hot period where humidity could amplify those impacts. July outlook doesn't show a lot of strong leanings, again, in temperature or rainfall, except for the western part of our region there, where it shows above average temperature more likely. And then also July through September shows very similar conditions. Here are the partners that have helped to provide information and data for the presentation today. And I'm also actually with Extension with South Dakota State University, and our website is igrow.org, shown in the bottom right there in the light green color. I'd like to thank you for your time here today. And if you would like to contact me at all, my email and phone number are there at the top. And then we also have Doug Cluck and John Ice from the National Weather Service, Mike and Natalie from the Regional Climate Centers, and then Brian Fuchs from the National Drought Mitigation Center. And John, I think that completes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Laura. And at this time, we're going to open up the lines and get your questions that you may have about today's presentation. Lindsay?
And at this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. And again, that's star 1 on your telephone keypad if you would like to ask a question. And there are no questions at this time.
Thank you, Lindsay. And once again, thank you, Laura Edwards, for your briefing today. We sure appreciate it. We'll see you all again next month. Watch your email for the latest details. Have a good day.